Welcome. This is a collection of first-hand accounts of the paranormal. Whether it's daytime, nighttime, you're in bed, or you're out doing whatever, drop a comment and hit that like button. Helps us out a lot. Get ready. Elf in my grandma's house. I need an explanation. I was at my grandma's house with many relatives because it was her birthday. She sometimes talks about the house's fairy, but I didn't know about it, and if I knew, I would have laughed at it, because it's obviously bullshit. Yesterday, something happened. We were having dinner in the garden, and my grandma asked me to go near the front door, to go near the intercom to open the gate. She wanted to ask her neighbor friend if she wanted some leftovers. Well, I went to the front door and opened it. It's a very heavy iron door. Pushed the button near the intercom to open the external gate. There was a bit of wind, but not enough to explain what happened. I heard from my left coming from the closet and not the intercom. Oh. It was really clear and from a location pretty close to mine. Not exactly shouted, but more of a way to draw my attention. I turned around really fast, but the closet was completely dark, so I wasn't able to look inside. It couldn't be neither somebody from the outside, it was clearly from my left and they were too far away from me to notice them, nor were they inside since there wasn't anyone in the house. At that point I got scared, turned around toward the main door, which I opened before, and it was closed. Completely closed. It's a heavy door. I would have noticed if it got closed. At that point, really scared, I ran upstairs inside the house. Today, my uncle texted me about what happened yesterday. I told him the full story, and at that point he says that it could be the small elf that my grandma sometimes sees. She says she saw him, and it's a small, hump-backed with pointy-eared creature. I don't know why even its appearance she sometimes refers to it as the house fairy. I don't really believe in this stuff, but one time my grandma predicted the death of the people that robbed her house. Maybe I'm just connecting unrelated stuff, and probably that it was just a coincidence. But I feel like it's worth noting. An angel and a tall man. To start this story off, I've moved a lot, and this story talks maybe about 2 and a little third one of my ghost experiences. I was about 4 when this happened, so I can't remember much about it, but my parents have told me that we lived in a 2-story house in the woods. There weren't many other people around us, but we still had some neighbors. By now, that place is filled with houses. My mother's told me that I used to play a lot with a ghost called Qiimassutissarput or something like that. Me and my sisters, 3 years younger than me, were the only people that saw her. My mother remembers me talking about a pretty average height white ghost who had a white dress that was almost to the ground. As I said, I don't remember much about it, but I do remember after a while that we went to a graveyard, and as usual, Qiimassutissarput came with us. But when we started leaving, my mother asked, "Won't you wait for Qiimassutissarput?" And I'd answered. She told me that she's going to stay here for now, and I never saw her again. The next story starts when I was about 6 or 7, maybe 8. I lived in a small apartment on the first floor. There was only one bedroom which was filled with stuff, so me and my family all slept in the living room on the sofa. It opens up into a bed. I was the one sleeping next to a wall, and on the other side of the wall was the kitchen. So pretty much every night I slept there, I got a nightmare, and I always woke up at 3 a.m., and then I would go to sleep later on. In the nightmares, there was a tall man, I would say about 190, like 6'2". They would always want to trap me or hurt me. The one I remember exactly is where me and my grandma were in the house and it was pouring rain. Suddenly I remembered that we'd left our shoes outside. When I opened the door to grab them, there he was, a tall, completely black creature. It looked like a person's shadow. Randomly, there was a trash can next to the door, and he put me in there and locked me inside it. At that point, it was 3 a.m., so I woke up. Once my mother tried sleeping on that spot, she also had a nightmare and woke up at 3 a.m. But exactly before we were about to move away, I fell asleep. And in the dream, I kind of woke up and like a ninja jumped out of the bed ready to fight. But as I was searching for him, I saw someone walking out of the kitchen. The kitchen light was randomly on. It was a tall man with a long beard and long hair. Turns out he wanted a friend to play with. In the dream, we agreed to meet up some other time and spend some, time together. But I never saw him again. Later, when I was talking to my mother about it, she told me that, there was a ghost portal on that apartment, and also was on the second or third floor. Can't remember exactly. Also forgot to mention that we saw many things get lost in there. Like I would throw a ball on the top of the wardrobe, and when I'd come to look for it, it just didn't exist anymore. Since then, I've always believed in ghosts, and the only appearance of a ghost I've had after that has been my current apartment. I was doing some editing behind my desk, and I decided to put both of my headphones on. I usually only have one. But when I did, I heard a loud bang exactly behind my back, and when I turned to look, there was not a single thing that had fallen or broken. Also, my neighbors dropping something makes a completely different sound. I've never heard or seen that ghost afterwards. I don't disturb them, and they don't disturb me. When I was talking to my mother about ghosts, she told me that once in this apartment, she almost fell asleep on a sofa in the living room while watching TV. Something had shooken her up, but she was all alone in there. And after that, she had a feeling like someone's watching her when she's watching TV, which doesn't happen to me. Did you also see shadow people when you guys were kids? When I was about 8 or 9 years old, I moved to live with my grandmother for a while. Her house was an old building with one floor and an inner courtyard where a huge fig tree grew. The house had 3 exits, but one of them was peculiar because it was wall attached to the main bathroom. The bathroom had a window of frosted orange glass that separated the room from the exit hallway. When I peed, I could see the silhouette of whoever passed by the hallway. In that house also lived 2 uncles, an aunt, and 2 cousins. But I often stayed alone because everybody had their occupations or went out to do some stuff. That's when something strange started to happen. Every time I entered the bathroom, I saw through the window some shadows that moved from left to right, as if they were going to exit. They were shadows of bald men, all the same, that only showed from the torso up, one after another with a distance of about 1 meter between them. At first, I thought they were real people, and I had fun trying to catch them. I used to leave the bathroom and run to the hallway, but I never did find anyone. It was as if they all vanished. After a few weeks, I stopped finding it funny. I realized that those shadows only appeared when I was alone in the house, and that no one else saw them. I got scared and thought that what I saw was not normal, but even threatening. Then I used to avoid the bathroom, or if I went, I covered my eyes, sat on the toilet to turn my back on the window. I stayed with this behavior for some months, until one day the shadows disappeared and never came back. Now I'm 24 years old, 24, and I've never seen anything paranormal again, except for that experience that marked me forever. Sometimes I wonder if it was real or if it was a false memory implanted by a vivid dream. But what intrigues me the most is that I've read cases of other people who also saw shadow people when they were kids. Am I crazy? Did my brain invent the story? Or did something similar happen to you? Has anyone ever experienced something paranormal with someone, but then when you talk about it with them, they don't remember? Hi everyone, I'm Jaylene. I'm 14. And the purpose of me writing this is because it happened to me today. So to begin, I was about 10 years old and with my cousins I'm gonna call G. And they were about 14 or 13 at the time. And I, the narrator, is gonna call Gina. Gina and I used to have sleepovers in her room, and we'd talk and play games. We were those type of kids that would say we were going to sleep, but in reality, we're on our phone or iPad. Anyways, we were in Gina's bed, on our electronics, just watching a show or something, when all of a sudden I pause whatever I'm watching because I hear what sounded like humming. But I could barely hear it. After a minute of trying to figure it out, if I was really hearing something or not, maybe it was just my headphones making background noise, Gina says, "Do you hear that?" I froze for a second, thinking, no, I don't think I really heard anything. I think I was just imagining something. So I then snapped back into reality and told her, no, I don't hear anything. And suddenly we hear a sound like somebody had crumbled a bag or stepped on it. It scared me and Gina, so we hid under the covers till one of us had the courage to get up and turn on the lights. Gina then told me that she had heard what sounded like a little girl singing. We both didn't sleep until morning. Gina's now 17. I brought it up to her today when we were having a discussion about the paranormal. She said that she didn't remember it at all and asked me if I was sure it happened in my room. She still lives in that room. Anyways, I just wanted to see if anybody had experienced something similar, because this is not the first time something like this has happened in my home. Haunted dorm room. It was a tiring day in my college. It was a hot summer evening. I had just returned to my dorm room. My roommate and I had separate rooms and one common room and a kitchen. I found that he wasn't there, so I didn't lock my room and just fell asleep. It was around 8 or 9 p.m. I later started to wake up feeling restless. I was having a blurry vision. My room was extremely hot, even though the fan was on and the window was open. I took off my shirt and drank water from my water bottle. I checked the time, and it was exactly 1:11 a.m. I felt something was wrong and I tried to stand up. Suddenly I got pulled up from the bed by my leg. I jumped back to my bed all confused and pressed myself against the wall. Still not fully conscious, I knew something was wrong. I tried to shout and call my roommate, but before I could do anything, I got slammed again into the opposite wall, this time by my shoulder. It felt like someone was trying to drag me into the wall by my shoulder. My bedroom door opened. I got dragged into an empty void. Now I woke up entirely covered in sweat. I didn't have a shirt on and my water bottle had fallen on the floor, but my door was closed. I was still confused and scared about what happened, and I had a bruise on my shoulder. I checked the time again and it said 1:10 a.m. I was too scared to sleep alone after that, so I went to my roommate who was still online playing games on his laptop. I tried talking to him, but he was too busy playing games. Haunted school. Okay, so not exactly my encounter, but one of a close family friend's. For context, this particular family friend, let's call her Jane, is a secretary and a teacher at a school which my parents teach. I attend, and is also under the church that we're part of, including Jane. And I think it should be mentioned that the grounds on which this school is built used to be a graveyard. So the school grounds have two separate regions, one where all the classes are situated along with the administrative office and the actual church building, and the back region where the residential building is. Our principal and the church pastor occupy the residential block with their family. Jane, being the personal secretary of the principal, is given a room at the campus, but her room is near the school region, so pretty close to all the classrooms. While Jane was staying at her house, she told us that it was not uncommon for her, you could say, to hear noises of the benches being pushed around, doors being banged, or even footsteps from the school building. Some nights she also hears knocks at her door, loud enough to wake her up from her sleep. And the possibility of anybody being there is ruled out because the door that leads to the school building remains locked. Also, this was apparently a regular occurrence. But the thing that creeped her out to the point that she came over to our house to sleep was one night Jane woke up to the sound of knocking at her door so loud that she was convinced something was knocking at her door, or someone. She got up, went to the door, but no one was there. She looked out to make sure. Look right, no one. Left, a lady. The lady was standing at this pedestal kind of a thing, wearing this long white gown and had her hair down. And the eerie part was that she was holding this large book, this huge book, was just looking into the sky. And in the blink of an eye, she just disappeared. Jane prayed as soon as she got to her bed, and the next day came over to our house to stay a few nights. She was so shaken. A ghost and a cheat. I know the feeling all too well. I put one in my lounge room. Now it's picking up growling and light talking, follows stuff I can't see. Growling. One stage the cam even filmed upside down. There's no option to even be able to do such a thing. But in saying that, I'm glad I put them up because in the end my ex-partner didn't know or forgot about the ones inside. And while at treatment for dialysis, I was playing around with the settings and happened to hear something. That something was 14 years being flushed down the drain with her cheating on me. Only 20 minutes before, she dropped off a kiss to me and said I love you and went home. Did that. So the cameras have microphones that I kept her, long story short, ended up asking her to leave and not coming back. Do I regret asking her to leave? Not at all. I'm now alone with loads and loads of health problems, can barely help myself or hold things or even push myself in my wheelchair anymore. But fighting every day to prove that I can do it. We both seen a rake that night. This happened back in 2014. I was about 15 or so, and my friend is about a year older than me. I'm staying the weekend at her house, which is out in the country with thick woods behind her property. It's rounding about 3 a.m. when we hear what we thought were cats messing around the woodpile on her dad's trailer. Her dog started to bark, so my friend said she was going to let her dog out. She'd go run the cats away from the trailer. The dog wouldn't hurt the cats when she chased them off, just didn't want them around the house. So my friend lets the dog out, lets him out the back door, and as she's walking away, I look out the living room window facing the backyard, which is the opposite side of the house. That's when I seen what looked like a very pale, bald man with really long arms crouching behind the trailer, and we'd heard rattling around. By that time the back door was open. I looked over to my friend staring at the trailer. She'd seen something as well. She looked over at me, and when we both looked back, it was gone and the dog was sniffing around the trailer. I asked if she'd seen that. She said half questioningly, "That weird white thing with the bald head behind the trailer?" I thought I was imagining it. She had taken the words right out of my mouth of what I saw. We called the dog back inside, locked the house down. We never let the dog out that late or bothered looking to see what was making those weird noises outside ever again. I looked up what we saw. Well, years later. And after reading up on reeks, I'm sure that's what we saw that night. Shadow person? Back in December 2022, me, a 24-year-old female, and my partner, a 23-year-old male, were playing with both our cats in the lounge. The lounge is connected to the house entrance and hallway. That leads upstairs. A door separates the lounge from the hallway, and in this scenario, this door is shut. Upon entering the lounge, there's a glass door which leads you into the living room. This is where my partner's parents were during this unexplained event. So the event that took place was simple, yet me and my partner cannot explain it. We were on our tummies, playing with the youngest cat, while laying on the floor, and we both laid our heads down, and our cat was playing with her toy fish. She grabbed it with her claw, but managed to throw the toy past us. It landed at the base of the door leading to the hallway. Watching our cat rush towards it, we laughed, reached to take the fish. Upon reaching for the fish, I see a pair of black shoes walk past in the hallway under the gap of the door. This door is solid wood, so I couldn't see who was there, just saw the feet. I didn't think anything of it and thought it must be my partner's dad. Only to turn to the glass door, seeing both his parents on the sofa watching TV. Confused, I looked at my partner. He looks at me and says, "You see that too?" The fact that I didn't have to say anything terrified me. There was absolutely no one else in the house. As it stood, everyone was either in the lounge or the living room. Right after realizing we both saw the same thing, we opened the door to find nothing. Nobody was there. My partner checks outside the front door and there's not a soul around. We ask his parents if there's been any visitors. Nope. We're confused. Haven't told many people this in fear of sounding crazy. His mom completely believes us, as she's had experiences in this house. This house is over 300 years old too, so I'm fascinated yet scared to investigate what me and my partner saw that day. I'm happy to elaborate on other events happening here, but it's fair to assume what we saw was supernatural or paranormal, right? Ask Reddit. I've been a witness to many strange occurrences in our house over the years, many of which happened to my very skeptical friends as well. We cannot explain this. The strange occurrences mainly center around my father and sister, while my mother and me, thankfully, have only been peripheral witnesses. 1. When I was around 7 years old, me and my sister and our babysitter were watching TV when the blood completely drained from my sister's face. She was 11 and she tries to scream. Nothing's coming out. Then she says she saw a small, hairy man walk through the living room right in front of us. She wouldn't stop crying. My mother thought she was making it up, but my father was eerily quiet. 2. When I was about 14, my father was screaming at me to leave the glass sliding door alone. Apparently, I was violently pulling at it, screaming at him to open it. I wasn't at home at the time. 3. My best friend came to visit me, and this being South Africa, was waiting at the security gate of our house to let him in. He was calling my name and I was on the toilet. We both hear my dad saying, "He's on the toilet, he'll be right back there." My blood froze. My father wasn't home. We had no idea what to make of it. 4. While another friend, the biggest skeptic I'd say, was sleeping over, him, me, and my sister were discussing my friend's girlfriend at the time. It was the middle of the evening, not too late. We were sitting in my sister's room. Something was violently throwing the chairs around the kitchen. The sound was as clear as day. Thinking it was a burglar, we locked the door and pressed the alarm button. When the security guys arrive, all the doors are locked. There's nothing amiss in the kitchen. This was truly frightening. 5. The whole family had heard a woman laughing and knocks on the doors. The TV switches on by itself. Volume increases and decreases on multiple televisions. Lights come on and off. We hear whispering at night, mostly indistinct, but sometimes referencing us. Psst, my sister's name. Psst. This was a weekly occurrence. 6. My father saw a small humanoid running up our stairs. Right around the time my sister saw the thing in our living room. He's also seen a woman walking around the house multiple times. 7. This happened about 3 years ago. My cousin was around 8 years old. We went inside the house to go swimming and get a towel. She starts screaming and running out of the house, face white as a sheet. She says there was a badly burnt child in my sister's room staring at her. She was truly shaken and sticks by her story. She doesn't like to come visit anymore. These are just some of the weird shit that's happened in this house. And yes, my family are all still living there. My father's an extremely quiet guy, to the point of it being painful, and not one to suffer fools. Which makes me even more uneasy about all this. We're not particularly religious or believers in the paranormal, but enough weird shit's happened to make me question this reality. My paranormal experience. I did, and still to some extent, consider myself a skeptic until I saw what I saw about 1.5 years ago. I've never really posted this anywhere. I only relate it to close family and friends. But some recent events have had this experience playing on my mind again recently. I've also been looking at it from a different angle, some recent realizations. So I'm a 20-year-old woman at this point, and this occurred when I was about 18 years old and living with my 35-year-old older sister. Things were bad at home with my parents, and she had graciously chosen to take me in at the time. I had at that point in time been living there for about 5 months when this occurred. So my sister's house was 2 stories tall with an attic, a relatively new house with a modern build in a newer area of our town. My room was upstairs. One night I walked upstairs at about 9 p.m. after my routine, eating dinner and doing dishes, and I headed to my room to grab my bathrobe for a shower. My sister and her husband both work in the medical field, so their schedules vary at times, and they had been asleep for hours to wake up at 2 or 3 a.m. for a shift. So, it was very dark upstairs. The only light that I would keep on so that I could see where I was going was the living room light. It shone bright white light downstairs, and a dimmer light at the top. But this was all I needed, as my room was about 4 feet to the right of the stairs. So as I said, I walked upstairs to my room doors, which were slightly ajar, stopped dead in my tracks. I saw a man peeking the top half of his torso and his head from behind my bedroom door. I truly thought this was an intruder at first, until I realized his entire silhouette was completely blurry, and his center was just black. As I stopped, almost had the big one. Whatever this thing was darted back behind the door as if I scared it as much as it had scared me. After about 30 seconds of standing completely frozen and trying to process what I had just seen, I went into my room, checked behind the door and under the bed, looked out the window. There was no one to be seen. About a month later, I had another experience. As I said, there was an attic in my sister's house. They didn't use it much at all, Pretty much just put extra boxes up there when they moved in and left it alone. I was doing dishes one day, and I heard what sounded like a jar falling to the floor, which I knew was the attic floor because the second floor was carpeted. Rolling for about 30 seconds before abruptly stopping at the opposite wall. I didn't really make this post for opinions about what I experienced. I would still be open to them if you have anything intuitive to offer. I'm still not sure what it was myself, but I'd like to add that I was doing more spiritual work than I ever had done before while staying at my sister's house. I was meditating daily, doing work with stones, just generally opening myself more to that side of myself because of the troubles I was dealing with at the time. I felt like it helped me as well. I'm not sure why I fell off of that lifestyle. It's something that I'd like to make a habit of again. But do you guys have any input as to whether or not this might have had any effect on my ability to connect with the other side? Would love to hear thoughts. Edit. I'd also like to add that again, I've been a skeptic for a long time, and would still pretty much consider myself one. I believe it's incredibly, naive, you could say, of humans to assume that they can make definitive conclusions about the afterlife, even though it's something that we know nearly nothing about. But I also realize that there are multiple other explanations for what I may or may not have experienced. I'm just looking for an open discussion. The Year-Long Hauntings of Itasca Hall, 2016. Part 1. The Witches' Cemetery. While attending college, me and a few buddies decided to visit Trout Lake. It's a Norwegian cemetery in Coleraine. We were bored and had read a few stories online stating that there was a haunted cemetery near us where a witch was buried. The post said her name was Bertha Maynard, and that she had killed, or was killed, I'm assuming, in the late 1800s for being a witch because her crops were better than all the other crops in the area. We got there around 1 a.m. and struggled to find her grave, even though the cemetery was small with only 30 graves or so. After walking around for a while, we eventually found her grave, but it was down a small hill near the lake and away from all the other graves in the cemetery. The grave looked like it had been damaged, and all that was visible was her last name on the bottom of the grave. Please don't vandalize people's graves. It's disrespectful, and it's somebody's ancestor. But apparently this grave was stolen once and found in a nearby lake, after some high school seniors were out there drinking. After we found the grave, I whipped out my phone and started recording a video, trying to act like the ghost adventure people. Started asking questions and then asked, "Bertha, please come forward and present yourself. Prove to the townspeople that you are not a witch." After I said this, wind chimes started to go off at the next closest grave behind me. Thought this was cool, so I started to film them. When my camera finally focused in on them, they came to a screeching halt and stopped making noise. At this point, my buddy says, "Whoa, it's not even windy enough for the wind chimes to go off." Shortly after, we left the cemetery and went back home. We didn't expect what was to follow the next year. Part 2. The Black Figure in the Kitchen. A week after visiting Trout Lake Cemetery, my roommate and I were sitting in my room watching TV when we decided to walk into the kitchen to grab some food. I turned into the kitchen to grab some food. I flip on the lights, and when I turned, I saw a black figure standing parallel to the refrigerator, as if it was trying to hide alongside it. I could see feet sticking out near the bottom and a head where a freezer is. I then looked back at my roommate standing over my shoulder and gave him the "what the fuck" look, and when I looked back in the kitchen, the figure had disappeared. I quickly ran back to my room, grabbed my notebook, and drew a quick sketch of what it is that I had seen. I asked my roommate if he had seen what I had just seen, and he laughed at me and said, "We just visited the witch's cemetery not long ago, and your mind's playing tricks on you." For the next few months, he kept making fun of me whenever we were agreeing about what we saw anytime the conversation came up. Finally, it was the day I was moving out, and before I left, he came up to me and said, "Hey, we need to talk before you leave. Do you still have the picture of the black figure you saw in the kitchen?" I was very annoyed and was thinking he was going to make fun of me again, but instead, he apologized, saying that he actually saw the same black figure that I did. But due to his religious beliefs, he couldn't get himself to accept what he had seen that day, and said it went against what he previously believed. He said he just kept telling himself it was fake because he didn't believe in ghosts. He wanted to apologize again and tell me it wasn't crazy. I showed him the picture and he 100% agreed in certainty that he had seen the same figure as me. Part 3. The Black Orbs. Quite often while sitting in my dorm bedroom, I would occasionally see black orbs floating for about a second or two. They would show up in my Snapchat pictures often, but only when I was in my dorm apartment, never when I was away from my room. One night a friend came to visit and spend the night, and we were up talking, and I noticed she kept glancing down the hallway. I asked her what was up. She said, "I don't want to sound weird, but there's this black orb that keeps floating from the kitchen to the bathroom. I've noticed it many times." I didn't tell her about this weird stuff happening lately because I didn't want to freak her out, so I just acted confused. I did end up seeing it once, and it was that night too after she mentioned it. I also had a third roommate who would randomly see a white mist in the apartment pass through occasionally, but I never witnessed this. But he claimed this happened many times. Part 4. The Notebook. It's been about 2 months since we had visited the cemetery, and 12 other people who lived on the same floor as me and whom I was friends with started coming to me with creepy and unexplainable stories of their own. It became so frequent that I started writing down everyone's experiences, had a half-full notebook. I kept detailed accounts with times and dates. I no longer have the notebook as I burned it one night a few years ago. I felt like I had to burn it, because I keep having these creepy things happen to me at new apartments as well, and at my childhood home. And after the creepy things would happen, I would always randomly stumble upon the notebook. Creepy and paranormal things have stopped completely in my life since burning the notebook, so I feel good that I did that. I can say that doing that helped close that chapter of my life. Part 5. The Snapchat Girl. One day I was at work and I checked my phone. I had a bunch of missed calls and messages from the girl who lived across the hall, asking if she could spend the night with me. I called her and she told me that all day she kept hearing somebody walking around in the kitchen and dropping pots and pans. She said she kept walking out there and saw nothing out of place, never saw anyone. She brushed it off as nothing until she was taking some selfies and a girl appeared in the doorway of her room. She said the girl was about 5'5", which was slightly shorter than her, had jeans on with a t-shirt and her hair up in a bun. The girl stopped her in the doorway and looked at her for a few seconds, then walked into her roommate's room, just moving through the door as it was closed. When I got home, she was waiting in the lobby and looked pale white. Bad anxiety. After that, she would always hear weird noises in her apartment and would constantly hear footsteps in the hallway, but never saw her again. Part 6. The Unexpected Visitors. One night I was sitting at home alone and I got a knock on my door. And as I answered the door, I saw it was 2 girls who used to live across the hall from me a year prior. These girls both lived in the same room where my friend saw the Snapchat girl. They asked how things were going in the dorms, and I said that things had been kind of weird lately. Left it at that. The one girl spoke up, and "Oh, you must be talking about the ghosts." I then asked them how they heard about all that stuff happening. They said they hadn't heard anything, but when they lived across the hall, they would hear things all the time in that dorm, and things always sounded like they were being moved. And you could hear people talking quietly in their dorm while at the same time hearing footsteps. They both agreed that they were glad to be out of there and assumed stuff was still happening. I asked them if they wanted to come in. They said they were just passing through town, felt the need to check in. I watched them leave, was super confused. What's weird about all this is that we weren't close at all. we would only exchange pleasantries in the hallway the year prior. So when they left for the night, it had me questioning things. Like, if they're in a rush, why come and visit me? And out of all the people to visit, why not visit some of your close friends that still live here? Part 7. The Girl Down the Hall. Just before all this stuff started happening, I met this girl who lived down the hall. Let's just say she has tons of weird stuff happening to her quite frequently. There's a couple of times her roommate just would come up to me, and they had a shared dorm because during the night she'd be kneeling on the loft bed, rocking it side to side aggressively while mumbling nonsense. And when she'd try to talk to her or wake her up, the mumbling would just get louder. Whenever her roommate would ask about this, the girl down the hall would have no idea what she was talking about and could never remember. I remember one Saturday her roommate came up to me again and asked what was up with the girl down the hall last night. I said, "What do you mean?" "She's at her parents' house this weekend." She said that she's not. Last night she was sitting in the corner of her bed just staring at me and whispering to herself. I tried to talk to her, but she wouldn't respond. When she told me this, I thought she was crazy, so I said, "Nope, she was at her parents' last night." I walked her out to her car and watched the girl down the hall leave. She said, "Well, somebody was chilling in her bed last night." After getting to know the girl down the hall, she too would also ask about always hearing people in the kitchen late at night, and would say that things are being thrown around her room, like books randomly falling off her desk or chairs moving by themselves. She said that she would wake up and her paperwork was often crumpled up on the middle of the room. I remember she would always find things missing, like her keys and headphones and wallet. She would be unable to find them, and then randomly they would appear a day or so after leaving them perfectly in the middle of the room. This girl always wanted to go for walks at night through the cemetery across the road from campus, which usually didn't bother me. But given all the weird stuff happening to her, I would start to go less and less frequently, even though I really enjoyed hanging out with her. By far the scariest stories that she told me was the one day before leaving for family vacation. She was sitting downstairs watching a movie, and when she stood up, she looked in the mirror. She saw an old man sitting in the chair that she was just in. She looked back at the chair, no one was there. Then looked in the mirror, and the old man was sitting there again, just staring at her with a glazed-over look. One day, her and her family left for vacation. When she returned, she said that there was a VHS sleeve sitting on the floor, and it said her name followed by baptism video. She called me and was freaked out because A, she didn't realize she had a baptism video and had never seen it because her family didn't own a VCR anymore, and B, she spent hours searching the house and couldn't find the VHS that fits inside the sleeve. I asked if someone broke into the house, and she said, "No, nothing else is missing. We live in the middle of nowhere, 20 minutes to the nearest tiny town. So why would anyone drive all the way up here just to steal a baptism video? And who would even known that it existed?" After that VHS went missing, she kept saying that she would hear an old man asking for help when she was home alone. Maybe the guy she saw in the mirror. I'm not sure, neither was she. She finally brought all this up to her parents, and her mom said, "I used to experience a lot of unexplained things and see people in the house. They weren't real when you were a kid. I just never said anything because you never asked." Part 8. The Group Chat. While all of this stuff was happening, we had a group chat going that consisted of about 12 of us. Most of us living in the second floor of our hall. I'd say at least once every other day somebody was messaging the group with some unexplained story or some weird, creepy thing that happened to them. Most of the stories consisted of hearing people walking around in their dorms or bedrooms. But what's strange is the fact that nobody had stories that took place outside of the hall. I also understand that we lived in a dorm and apartment building, so you have to take certain noises with a grain of salt, because college students are loud and drunk, and sometimes this causes things to happen unintentionally. I haven't been back to the building since I left, but I'd be curious to spend the night or even visit just to see if I get the same feeling or similar experiences. That feeling of being watched. So me and my friend love being in the forest. We feel safe there. Or we usually do. A while ago, I left to go take a picture of a waterfall while my friend stayed back in our usual spot. Pretty close to the waterfall, but neither of us could see each other. Whilst I was there, my friends started to feel like they were being watched. But not that usual just shrug it off kind. No, they felt like they were in danger. When I came back, they asked, "Do you feel like you're being watched?" Looked around for a second before agreeing that I did. But instead of leaving, we stayed and talked for a while for some reason. But eventually it became an unbearable feeling of dread and like we were in danger. So we quickly got our stuff and got the hell out of there. Once we crossed the bridge out of the forest, the feeling left. We felt safe again. Then yesterday, none of my friends could come with me outside, so I went alone. I didn't, originally intend to go into the forest, but I did. I felt safe there. I needed the comfort of nature at that moment. So I walked around for a bit going around the area, but not the spot. We both love warrior cats, so we made our own clan in the forest, which is the area that we tend to hang out in. Then I decided to go to the same spot, since our spot, I just couldn't walk past it. Then when I was there, I saw a bike light, and what are they saying? Need a cigarette. When I was there, I saw a bike light on the path. It was getting dark, by the way. No big deal, there's always bikers here. I didn't think much of it and went to pick something up that I saw. But then when I grabbed it, I saw a person dragging the bike up and off the path and onto the grass. The path is a bit below the grass, so you have to climb up to get up. But there's no path or anything to bike on. Felt creeped out and left the area, going to a different spot, which was a rock surrounded by a river. Unimportant information, I think. Though we did make it to the Moonstone from warrior cats. I went up onto the rock and just sat there for a while. At this point, you couldn't see shit in the trees from the darkness, but I felt the feeling of being watched again. A similar area. It started in the same area as last time. When I glanced into the trees, I felt as if I saw a person's head move, like out of the way. When I looked at them, nobody was there from what I could tell. I ignored it and stayed, but the feeling of being watched became unbearably large again, this time bigger than before, so I quickly got off the rock and left. The thing is, I felt it all the way up till I went past the spot. It stopped when I got to the clan rock. Then, when I had to walk past an area that had some of the same trees as by the Moonstone, just on the other side, I felt it again. It didn't leave until I crossed the freaking bridge. Does anybody know what in the hell that was? Haunted elevator. I just finished at 6:30 p.m. an exam held at the upper wing of our school building. The upper wing has the classrooms. The lower wing holds the lobby and has an elevator to the left and a staircase across from it to the right. Since the building has glass walls and has Christmas lights strewn over the glass facade encasing the lower wing, maintenance has the lower wing at lights out at 6 p.m. for aesthetic purposes. The outdoor Christmas lights really pop this way. Anyway, so I just finished my exam, which was held at room 402, and I was one of the first students to do so. When I exited the exam room, I was alone, making my way to the lower wing where the lobby is at, and I was ready to descend the staircase. That's when the elevator right behind me just opened. I looked over and it was so brightly lit that it illuminated the entire dark lobby. But no one was at the lobby except for me, and no one was inside the open elevator at all. I noticed that the call button was lit too, and it indicated that it was going down. So I thought, maybe someone exited really fast and accidentally clicked a button or two before leaving. Found it weird, but I paid it no mind. I continued descending to the third floor by the staircase, and then right when I landed at the third floor lobby, the elevator opened again. It cast cast an unmissable light from the other end of the floor. I looked over again and I saw once more that no one was inside the doors, and no one was at the lobby at all. The call button was lit again, and it still showed that it was going down. I was nervous at that point, and I couldn't bear to look at too long. So keeping my eyes on my shoes, I hurried down the stairs to the second floor, and it happened again. The elevator opened right when I reached the second floor, cast a light on the whole lobby, and showed me once more that no one was there. No one inside the bright elevator, and no one at the lobby who could have pressed the call button, which was still lit and was going down. I raced to the ground floor, but this time the elevator didn't follow me anymore. The ground floor, which was empty, was also at lights out, but the main doors leading outside allowed some light and some noise in. I ran out of the building as fast as I could, and I only got ready to relax a couple of paces outside the building when a classmate called out to me from the benches. Last night my grandma passed away, and the TV turned on by itself. Audio only. Last night, December 15th, my grandma passed at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. India time around 8 a.m. December 16th. I've missed almost all my family funerals due to expenses, and the bodies never held for longer than a day before cremation because of my family's choice in India. I've missed my grandpas, my aunts, and now my grandmother, all on my father's side, due to living in the U.S. Since I found out last night around 11 p.m. and thought of "forgive me" echoed in my head a million times as I sobbed uncontrollably. I asked I just needed one sign to know that she's forgiven me for not being able to make it to yet another funeral. I then called my dad to tell him what happened early in the morning of the 15th. Not sure if it was related, but I had a dream. I dream a lot, but I share especially when following events that are strange. But since I moved to my new home, been here for 9 months, I never have any of these scary, uncomfortable dreams or other paranormal experiences, as I usually do with those in hotels or older places. Anyway, in my dream I saw a woman float into my bedroom. A dead bride. Kind of weird, like a typical movie. And as I'm trying to get my husband's attention to tell him about this intruder, I get up to stop her. As I do, I get up from the dream. Naturally, I get very scared at the night, especially due to nightmares, so I breathe heavy, wake up my husband, and I'm unable to sleep throughout the night. I wake up the morning of the 15th for a doctor's appointment. As I drive to it, I think of how lonely this woman must have felt. Anyway, as I'm telling my dad this dream recall, my TV went off. Audio only. This has never, ever happened before. My husband and I were on the couch FaceTiming my dad. Both remotes were on the table. Nobody touched or sat on it. I usually have a sixth sense of things, but never would have predicted the passing of my grandma. Like a couple of weeks ago, I had a dream my parents got into an accident, but they were both fine. That morning, right as I woke up, my mom, and she called me, said Dad's feeling like he's having a heart attack. In the end, with God's grace, he was all okay. And it was all an accident technically. My grandma lost her husband about a decade ago. Her daughter, who's my aunt, a little more than a decade ago. She always felt very lonely. She lived with my other aunt, but I knew she was very lonely and not the happiest. Anyway, the TV's audio turning on, I like to believe that she gave me a sign. I saw my wife come home to shower. It wasn't her, and I'm not crazy, I think. This happened in September. Been trying to process this and even discuss with my wife. She's stumped like me. IWFH, and my wife, is a freelance photographer. Our daughter was at school, and my wife left at 10 a.m. that morning. She had 3 photo shoots to do, and she said she would be home by 3:30 after picking out her daughter from school. We said our goodbyes, and I continued to work. At 1:30, I hear the door coming from the garage entrance open and close. I assume it was her maybe making a quick stop. Either way, I poke my head out of the office and see her walking toward her bedroom. I assumed something happened because she was wearing a different outfit. I go to my desk and finish the task I was working. Since I was almost done, it only took a minute. I go to her bedroom and see her in the shower. Figured she probably made a mess or was sweating and wanted to refresh before the next shoot. I did say anything. Just left her alone. I'm assuming they meant that they didn't say anything. She looked at me and smiled, and I smiled back. Nothing unusual. I go back to my office and continued working on other projects. At 1:45, I received a text from my wife with a picture. She ran into an old friend of mine at one of the photo shoots. Apparently, it was for him and his fiancée, an engagement shoot. I asked her where this was and how she got there so fast, and why did she change back into the clothes she was wearing. She was confused, told me she just left there. It was her second photo shoot. The first one was at 10:30, 11:30, about 25 minutes from her house. The second one was at 12:30 or 1:30, 45 minutes from her house, according to Google Maps. I told her what I saw. I even went to the bathroom. The shower was wet. Her towel was wet. The clothes were gone, though. There were wet footprints on the bath mat. I showed her the video. She was stunned, as was I. I'm asking here, what the hell just happened? No, I'm not crazy. Well, for now. That could change. I can't say it's a ghost, but this was definitely not normal. It's not happened again since that time. Weird man just vanished. It's an incident that's happened around 3 years ago during the early days of COVID quarantine, somewhere between March to September of 2020. I got home after a night shift. This was like 3 a.m. My girlfriend was sleeping, and I took out her dog for her usual night walk like I used to do every night around night shift around this time. It was the first COVID quarantine in my country, and most people were taking it pretty seriously. There weren't many people outside during the day, even less at this late hour. Near the end of the walk, I see a man dressed in a suit walking down the street ahead of me. Keep in mind that in my country, practically no one wears a suit unless you're in a groom in a wedding. Even lawyers in courts don't wear, suits most of the time. So it really stood out. Especially at 3 a.m. He also had a flat cap, which is also very uncommon. The more I was looking at the man, the more curious I got. I noticed he wasn't walking right. He was limping, but not the way an injured man limps. He seemed like someone who doesn't know how to walk properly, or like someone with a severe mental issue like Down syndrome or something. My first instinct was to get closer, thinking some poor mentally ill person had lost her, something. But my dog wouldn't let me get close. My dog's usually extremely curious and friendly. Any person we see while on a walk is a potential friend for her. She'd usually be thrilled to approach strangers outside. But in this case, she was absolutely terrified. She pulled on her leash and cried, not wanting to get close to the guy at any price. So, I didn't get any closer to the guy, and I saw how he limps weirdly until he got behind a car. He was standing so I could see his head over the roof of the car and parts of his body through the car windows. Never got a good look at his face as it was dark and he never really looked straight at me. The person suddenly stood up straight. He went from limping and barely standing up to standing up complete right and straight in a moment. Didn't seem awkward in his movements anymore. He took off his flat cap, stuffed it in his jacket, started searching his pockets for something. I assumed he was looking for car keys since he was really close to the car, and at some point he seemed to have dropped something. Again, I assumed it was the car keys. He bent down to pick it up, and I couldn't see him anymore. I waited for a few seconds and he wasn't standing up, and at this point my dog seemed more at ease and was more curious than scared. I got closer to the car looking for the guy. He wasn't there. I looked for him behind the car and under it, looked inside the car through the windows, and there was no one inside neither. There was no way he could have gone anywhere without me noticing it. The car was parked next to the sidewalk with no other cars next to it, open space in all directions. Any direction he would have gone, I'd have seen it. The dog would have seen it. I was really tired after a night shift. If I was alone, I'd be convinced I was imagining it, but that night my dog, who's usually very cuddly chill and sleeps all night snoring like a truck driver, didn't even get into bed with me. She was in the corner of the room, shivering with fear, and stared at the door all night. In the morning, she behaved normally again. I've never seen her act like this before or since. Strange music in my head. I was around 10 or 11 years old when this took place. I'm 21 now. I had really often nightmares and anxiety problems as a child, which is why I often was sleeping in my mom's bed. I was only living with her. My mom always left her door open in the night, and you could look into her hallway. She was laying in front of me facing to the door, and I was behind her, so I'd basically have to lean over her to look into the hallway if I wanted to. It sounds so dumb, but if you played the Slender Man game, you probably know his heartbeat sound that comes when you collected the first 1 or 2 pages. And I swear to God that one night when I was trying to sleep, my mom already was, I start to hear this extremely loud heartbeat with like an ominous music straight out of my head in my ears or something. I don't really know how this was possible, or exactly what was even happening. But I immediately start shivering with anxiety and quietly tried to wake up my mom, shaking her and telling her to wake up. I don't know why, but I didn't care to look over in the hallway. Maybe it was just the extreme fear, because something I couldn't explain was occurring. But I felt some kind of presence there. My mom wasn't waking up, so I started to get a little louder with my voice and shaking her more. Then my anxiety became so extreme that I pushed and even kicked against her back. I was so in fear. Didn't bring anything, and at that point I couldn't understand anything no more. I literally just turned around again, facing the wall, and laid there. It felt like 30 or 45 minutes, till this heartbeat and the music in my head finally stopped. I couldn't sleep for another hour. The next day when me and my mom was awake, she didn't really seem to notice that I literally pushed and kicked against her back for minutes that last night. I never told her. Thought she was being influenced by something that night, and it was so creepy, it gives me chills till today. This has never happened again since. I only told this old friend once, and I don't think that he took me serious. That's the end of tonight's stories. Slightly more brutal command of the English language this evening. See ya.